Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
That works.
Okay. All right. With that, is there any other discussion regarding today's agenda?
None from Albany.
So do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
So all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Or any abstention? Thank you. You've also received a copy of the draft minutes from the December 13th, 2024 meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding those minutes? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Epstein, second.
Second.
Castro, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. With that, we're going to move to executive session. Is there a motion to enter into executive session to discuss matters relating to a current investigation or matters that may lead to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person?
So moved.
Mr. Castro, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Buffalino. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. At this point, if you're not a commission member or staff, you'll be expelled from the Zoom meeting, and if you're in the room, please patiently wait outside. We'll resume. We'll come get you when we're done. Thank you. So when we opened the meeting, we were not recording. We're just going to do a quick attendance retake, just so that we have it on the record, and then we'll be good to go. Okay. Lieutenant Colonel Banbury.
Here.
Mr. Castro.
Here.
Ms. Goldthwait.
Here.
Ms. Roush.
Here.
Dr. Buffalino.
Present.
Mr. Epstein.
Here.
Dr. Marciano.
Here.
Ms. Schmidt.
Here.
Dr. Chicklin.
Here.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Here.
Commissioner Rosado. Okay. So also just for the record, the agenda was approved. And we also approved the draft minutes from the December 13th meeting.
As well, the members voted to go into executive session. While in executive session, they took no action, and then the members voted to exit executive session.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion for the commission to send a letter to the OCME requesting certain records previously requested by a working group of the commission, but not supplied by the OCME, and which pertain to an investigation by the working group of a complaint.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move on to accreditation and laboratory updates. Our first laboratory on the agenda is the Erie County Medical Examiner's Office of Forensic Toxicology. DCJS and ANAB have been notified that Melissa Bowler has returned from extended leave and will resume her role as the county's chief toxicologist. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Next is the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology. DCJS and ANAB have been notified that Tim Kuberschmidt, Chief of Laboratories and Director of Forensic Biology, has left the laboratory effective February 21st. First Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Michelle Sloan, will serve as the Interim Director of Forensic Biology. Dr. Sloan's CV has been provided for the review of the commission. Any questions? Okay. Up next, the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Toxicology. DCJS and ANAB have been notified of 2 staffing updates effective February 10th. Dr. Damon Borg has joined the laboratory as an Assistant Director of Forensic Toxicology. A copy of his CV was provided and can be distributed to members if requested. Quality Manager Elbo Arango is out on extended leave, and this Assistant Director and Deputy Quality Manager Ronaldo Fonseca will be the point of contact during this time. Are there any questions for the laboratory? The New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner Forensic Anthropology Unit. In November of 2024, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity and there were no findings. The assessment report and activity plan were provided and reviewed at the December 2024 meeting. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of the activity, and the lab has also been in contact with ANAB regarding several updates to their scope document. They are currently awaiting to receive these corrected documents from ANAB. Any questions for the laboratory? Okay. Up next is the New York City Police Department Police Laboratory. DCJS and ANAB have been notified that Lieutenant Matthew Glenn is now the commanding officer for the firearms analysis section. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Up next is the New York State Police Crime Laboratory. In January, ANAB conducted a surveillance document review. There were no findings. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of this assessment activity. Laboratory has also notified DCJS that effective February 20th, Allison Sage is the state CODIS administrator, and effective February 24th, Jamie Belrose is the bioscience casework technical leader. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Okay. Niagara County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory. In February, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment and document review. There were no findings. The laboratory is waiting to receive their final documents from ANAB. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Okay. Hearing none, we will move into old business. The first item on old business is an update regarding familial search. I have some stats to report. Since our December meeting, there have been 5 new applications received. They're all initial first-time submissions. 3 applications have been approved and 3 searches have been completed. That brings the total applications to 71. 51 have been approved, 3 were withdrawn, 13 were rejected, and 4 are in the final review stage. And of those approved, 10 are in the search queue and 41 searches have been completed. Any questions regarding familial search? Okay. Up next, the NIST interagency report. At the February 28th DNA subcommittee meeting, in response to the commission's request, the subcommittee voted to form a subgroup of 3 members to review the NIST human factors report and write a position statement for the commission. At this point, OFS is providing administrative support to get the working group stood up, with the goal that they'll have time to put a statement together for the full subcommittee to review at their May meeting and then provide to the commission. Also, the NIST DNA mixture interpretation foundation review. This is way back. If you recall, this was first discussed in September of 2021. The document DNA mixture interpretation and this scientific foundation review was finalized and released in December of 2024. Back in September of 2021, the Commission on Forensic Science requested that the DNA subcommittee be provided with the validations and standard operating procedures from all of the New York State laboratories utilizing probabilistic genotyping. Those documents were provided to the subcommittee at their February meeting. The subcommittee voted to have labs provide any updated documents that may have happened between 2021 and 2025. And they also determined that they will form another subgroup to look at those documents and review the final NIST Mixture Interpretation Foundation review and provide guidance to the labs for their consideration based on that document. So OFS is also working to get that subgroup up and running so that they can have an update at their May meeting for the subcommittee. So yes, so the update on human factors was that there is a subgroup of the subcommittee starting to review and draft for a May position statement that the whole group can agree upon and then send back to the commission in June. As your function. So those are the two updates at the moment. Questions or thoughts?
I have a question. You mentioned that the DNA subcommittee will be forming these two, 3-person subcommittees, right, to examine these reports. And one, with respect to human factors, will come back to the commission for consideration. But it sounded like the second one, with respect to the NIST Mixture Foundation review, will be going to the labs. Is that, won't we have an opportunity as a commission to review it as well?
So going back to the 2021, the initial ask on that one was to get the probabilistic genotyping documents. That subgroup is going to look at those and respond to the commission's ask on those documents, and additionally look at that document that was finalized and try to pull out kind of preemptively, since you had all asked about the other document, to pull out recommendations and guidance. We should try to do that work as well. And I assume we would pass that along to you when they have a plan.
Okay, good. Because it also seems, and I understand, just for the purposes of getting the work done, because these are both massive reports and everybody's busy dividing up the work, but clearly the reports, there's crosstalk, right? They're all related to the same, DNA interpretation, mixture interpretation, maybe slightly different in scope, but obviously, they're related. So I would hope that the subcommittee, when it does its work, considers that. So for instance, there was definitely talk during the subcommittee, I think Dr. Bieber raised the issue of activity level propositions, which is discussed in both of the documents, and which is critically important, right? Concerning the relevance of DNA results the testing results will have. I would make one suggestion or request, because activity level propositions were discussed at length by both reports, and Dr. Bieber raised it as a critical issue, and I think all the other members of the subcommittee agreed that also be expressly considered. And I think it was Dr. Coble maybe that made reference to his experience in Texas. And the NIST Mixture Foundation review explicitly referenced a report by the Texas Forensic Commission on activity level propositions in response to a complaint that was made about testimony that I think the complaint was that it overreached and was not in accordance with best scientific practices. All that to say is that the Texas Forensic Commission has done a lot of work in this space, and in their complaint, which is available on their public website, they have made specific recommendations with respect to activity level propositions. So it seems like that is a good, especially with Dr. Coble's connection to Texas, maybe a good place to start or to incorporate by looking at a fellow commission's extensive work with respect to activity level propositions, and more broadly, what are labs doing, when asked hypotheticals about how DNA could get on an item and those kinds of questions. So I would just suggest that the recommendations of the Texas Commission be considered. I just think it's helpful. It's a starting point. And I'd be interested to see what the subcommittee thinks of that.
Any other discussion on these two documents? Okay. So when we were originally accepting the agenda, this is there's two updates that we weren't incorporated, but we were prepared to give. So we'll give the OSAC update and the DOH mission update. At the commission in December, Dr. Marciano, you had made a request for an overview of which labs in the state are adhering to the OSAC formally or informally, and on the registry, the OSAC registry of standards. Dr. Pardon?
Sorry, or plans to.
Or plans to do, yes. So OFS helped conduct a survey for NICLAC. And I believe, Ms. Schmitz, you may have some update about the results of that survey.
Yes, I do, thanks. So yes, a survey went out, and then in one of our last NICLAC meetings, lab directors discussed the survey and OSAC. And so most labs have reviewed the OSAC documents. Many of them have begun to or plan to implement appropriate and practicable recommendations outlined in those documents. Labs agree they're all using these as guidance documents. Many through gap analysis have found that they're already incorporating many of the recommendations into their SOPs, again, as appropriate and practicable. The overall feeling was that labs do have a robust mechanism for reviewing the OSAC documents as they come out. Many of the labs have directors and or analysts who participate in the OSAC committees, and they're all actively reviewing the draft documents. The other thing that we discussed was the subject matter experts who participate in the technical working groups, so the TWIG groups. This is on their agenda, so they are routinely reviewing those and discussing the OSAC documents per their discipline. And again, they're recognizing them in conjunction with other guidance documents that are out there in the forensic field. So overall, the state is, for the majority, in the process of reviewing them, doing the gap analysis, or have begun to implement those that are, applicable and practicable.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I jump in? Michelle?
Sure.
Since I responded to that survey, I think in part of the process of doing the review, in some instances, the labs were already there. So it's not necessarily, in some instances, a question of adopting something because we didn't already have it. It was already being in line with recommendations. So sometimes it's which came first, the chicken or the egg, were we there, and then it's just elucidated by OSAC and, put down. So it's kind of like, well, if we say, yes, we're in line with OSAC, is it because they gave us the idea, or is it just that the fact that we were there and now it's actually being put into writing? So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that it's not like a lot of this stuff isn't new to us. It's just that now they're putting it down on paper. I didn't want it to be a situation where, well, if you're not saying that you follow OSAC, then you're not doing it. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Lydia.
Yeah, I acknowledge that. You're all accredited labs, and that's not the issue at all. I just was interested in finding out, given the resource OSAC is now, if there were plans to review it and implement. And I acknowledge that most, if not all, of the requirements or the guidance in OSAC is already being done in labs.
Is NICLAC considering a recommendation about, how does this work with our accrediting body, ANAB? Like, if I understand labs are saying that they're voluntarily complying with them or using them as guidance, and I understand we're not here yet, but is there eventually the thought that these OSAC standards will be incorporated into accreditation requirements via ANAB, via us as a commission? I realize that's a decision farther on down the road, but it's not by considering that particular question.
NICLAC is not discussed that yet. At this point, we all view them as guidance documents, and we're again, adopting or have already implemented a lot of the documents and the applications that are recommendations that are in there. But there's been no discussion about making them a standard. And I have not heard anything from the ANAV level either about incorporating those into the standards. So I think that would be down the road if ever.
How would a stakeholder, for instance, know what the lab is complying with on a voluntary basis, for instance, right? If, like, how would we, stakeholders in the criminal justice system know what standards from OSAC the lab was complying with and what they weren't? And, maybe even if they were largely complying with one particular standard, but not a couple of the requirements, like how would that be communicated to stakeholders?
I think there would need to be some communication between the stakeholders and their labs regarding their SOPs and what procedures they are following. And then you would have to understand the OSAC recommendations to recognize if they're following them or not. But that would be a conversation between the stakeholder and their local lab.
And they're not procedures, so they're recommendations. So I think we also need to, let's use our words, just saying, it's not a procedure, it's a recommendation. And I would agree that if the stakeholder were in possession of our protocols, say, as part of discovery, and they also had the OSAC recommendations, then they can do a comparison to see whether they basically jive with each other. So I think that is a way for stakeholders to see whether we were generally in alignment. And if they then wanted to raise an issue to say, well, hey, what about this piece of it? Have you guys considered that? I think that's a mechanism where they could get that information.
Well, I agree that because the labs aren't being accredited to these standards, they are voluntary, right? But some of the OSAC documents are standards, so they are requirements. I understand though if there's no enforcement mechanism or you're not accrediting, it is on a voluntary basis. But many of the documents that OSAC has produced are actually requirements. So if a lab was to adopt a standard, they would have to abide by those requirements in order to say, I'm accredited to this standard, which I understand we're not there yet. I understand.
Albany or Pat, you good? Okay. The second update that was requested was comparing the Department of Health standards for their clinical laboratory program with the standards utilized for the forensic DNA labs, publicly accredited DNA labs. The Department of Health documents are available online. OFS staff took a look. It's not very easy to compare apples and oranges. With the accredited forensic labs, you're utilizing the ISO document and ANAV's documentation, which doesn't get to the same place the DOH clinical lab program gets to. They're looking at different components. I don't know if Dr. Rauch wants to comment on that, how that program was developed, where your checklist came from. It is slightly different than what AAD is looking at.
I can provide a bit of the history on it. So we only accredit the forensic toxicology and forensic identity, forensic biology areas. The forensic toxicology, the subject matter expert in that area, heavily developed those standards based on SAMHSA requirements. And then for the forensic identity or biology area, those were primarily built off of the FBI QMS quality standards and some other New York State specific requirements when it comes to the appropriate personnel that we can recognize based on Department of Health regulations. I mean, that's provided some of the context. We did not draft them off of ISO at all.
So the QAS components are similar. But the ISO requirements would be very different. And the ISO requirements are, management system and quality assurance practices. Specific. Record keeping. Is there anything deeper?
One question, in the review, was there anything observed substantive difference in standards that you found educational or advising respect to best practices that would be good for us to take over for public labs? Was anything learned from it substantively?
At this point, we didn't look at it through that lens. You'd like us to go back and look again. It is not easy to compare them directly because they do have a difference. Okay. And the quality assurance standards, having those met, I think we're very comfortable with that being the bar for our DNA.
So it's a different language essentially. Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. New business. First item of new business is the review of the 2024 annual lab summaries, and I'm going to ask Lindsay to give a brief update because she lived in this document for the last couple of weeks.
The annual lab summaries are prepared for each lab by the Office of Forensic Services, and they're used to document all accreditation-related communications. The document is attested to by a lab director or their designee to confirm that all communications were provided to us and forwarded to the commission and subcommittee as appropriate. They should be familiar because you get them in the first meeting of every year. But if you have any questions for the documents that were provided for 2024, I can try to answer them.
I did have one question. I found them very helpful and I think they're a really good resource, right, for being able to track where in a commission meeting or a DNA subcommittee meeting something is discussed. And I know it must have taken a lot of work. So just want to recognize that. I did have a question about the overlap or not overlap between two categories. There's one which is, I think, accreditation and findings maybe, and then there's another category that's lab disclosures. Am I correct in understanding that if during the course of an audit there was a nonconformity finding, that would be in the accreditation part, but if a laboratory in its own quality system detected a nonconformance, that would only be under the lab disclosures? Does that question make sense? Like, are they mutually exclusive categories or?
Yes, and how you described it is correct. Anything in the accreditation portion deals with their external accrediting body and those activities. So any findings and the remediation would be under that section. And then anything that's disclosed by the lab themselves would be in the disclosure section.
Like detected by the laboratory on their own as opposed to say during the course of an audit?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then I think you want to interject.
If there are no other questions about the laboratory summary. I just wanted to remind the commission members that I expect today you're going to receive an email about your annual financial disclosure. If you have any questions, I can refer you to Natasha Harmon Locklear, who continues to be the ethics counsel for the commission.
Thank you. So that will take us to our next area, laboratory disclosures. Up first is the Erie County Central Police Services Forensic Laboratory. The laboratory notified DCJS and INAV that a corrective action regarding missing evidence items that was first discussed in December of 2024 has been closed. The issue was first detected during an inventory of the vault in 2024's internal audit, and an additional item was unable to be located following an inventory of the entire drug vault. The laboratory investigated the issue and has modified procedures to prevent a reoccurrence in the future. Modifications include scheduling more frequent drug destruction to prevent a buildup of evidence to be destroyed, using barcode scanning instead of manual entry when putting evidence away, and selecting more custom locations to check in the 2025 internal audit. The laboratory has notified agencies with the affected cases, and if there's any questions for the lab, representatives are available.
I had some questions.
So Michelle, I think we'll try to get Maria available, but I'm not.
Yes, Maria doesn't call in. Give me just 1 minute to try and get her.
Yeah, she did the root cause, but I'm pretty familiar
Hello,
with.
is this Maria?
Hello?
Hi, is this Maria?
Yes, it is.
Oh, perfect. I got the right one. All right, you guys are good
Congrats.
to go.
Thank you.
Hi, Maria, can you hear me? This is Lydia DeCastro.
Hi, yes, I can.
So I'm looking at your root cause worksheet. Does the computer outside the vault have a hand scanner?
It does.
It does. And I was curious about the volume of cases that were received in the days around the receipt of these items.
Okay, so I don't have that exact number for you.
Because I'll just read from the document. This was page 104 at the bottom. The drug vault requires 2-person swipe access for entry. This is page 133 for the commission members. The drug vault requires 2-person swipe access for entry. During the interview, they stated that they often do not have time to put the evidence on the intended shelf and just put it securely in the vault to be moved as time allows. So I was just wondering whether there was a higher volume of cases that caused this problem to happen. But I understand if you don't have that information at the moment.
I don't.
At the top of page 2, there's another statement. Additionally, being a 2-swipe entry system, it is possible that the items were not moved right away due to waiting for another evidence clerk or analyst to enter the vault with the receiving analyst. Is there a particular level of staff who may enter the vault without the need to double swipe?
No, everyone is required to have the double swipe, and the only people that have access to the vault are myself, Michelle, the lab director, all of our 6 chemists, and our 2 evidence clerks.
How hard is it to get that second analyst to come in and do that double swipe?
I really think it would probably just depend on the day. If, all of the chemists are busy at the workbench, we try not to have them interrupted by an evidence clerk, because we only have 2 clerks. One is usually working on intake and one is working on release. So it could be easy, it could be difficult. It's hard to say.
Does the chain of custody indicate that the evidence is in what's supposed to be its final location? Even if it's in the temp storage area?
Yes.
And is there supposed to be a time frame for when the temp storage items should be moved to their final locations?
We don't have a specific time frame, but everything needs to be put away by the end of the day.
By the end of the day?
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on 1 second. The destruction procedure, can you describe what has changed between what you had before and what you have now?
Actually, is it possible if Michelle could speak to that, because she knew the prior destruction procedure and I have actually never participated in one of those?
Of course.
Yeah, Maria, no problem. I can take it. So prior to this occurring, we would destroy drug items for a given year. So what we hold the items for 5 years, we get authorization to destroy them from the stakeholders, and then we prepare the inventory. Every item gets inventoried, accounted for, marked for destruction, and the barcode, it is scanned to an inventory for destruction location. That location is on the vault floor, where you need 2-person access. Once that is completed, I go through and give the final authorization, and then we, on the day of destruction, the chemist, the evidence clerk, myself, we move all of those items that are inventoried for destruction to the vehicle, and off they go, and it's escorted by police, and it's kind of a big deal. The part that we have changed is we are making that destruction list shorter now. We're not doing a full year at a time because of the amount of drugs that we receive in a year. So therefore, there's fewer items on that inventory for destruction area in the vault awaiting destruction. We've also made an instructional aid for the analyst to follow, giving more attention to marking the items destroyed at the time using a fluorescent orange sticker, making sure that is on all of the items. And then the day of the destruction, that will be monitored closer when they move from inventory for destruction to the destroyed custody location. The other thing that we have changed, so what we found, because of the size of the destruction, it wasn't easy for the evidence clerks to get to the shelves in that room for items that were not for destruction. So with fewer drugs being prepared for destruction, they should be able to get to those shelves easily. Forcing them to use the barcode scanner prevents them from putting it in a secure location and then putting it on the shelf at a later date. They have to go to that shelf at that time, scan the shelf, scan the items, confirm that they're on there. So there's no more putting them in there securely without putting them on the intended shelf. So that has changed. I think that's our major change for destruction. Ray, did I forget anything that you can think of?
No.
Thank you. Did you receive any, or have you received any information with respect to the second item 4 that was discovered as a result of you, like, I guess, doing the inventory? Did the customer or the submitting agency confirm that, oh yeah, we have that 4th bag of green leafy substance back at the precinct? Is that something you can check, or were you able to open one of the other bags and see if there was something that fit that description in one of the 3 other evidence bags? Is that an appropriate thing to do in an investigation, or?
So that item was opened a couple times during the investigation, because if you look at the submission form, what the officers have called is item 3 and item 4, and bear with me, I'm trying to get to that page, there it is. They have a very similar description, green leafy substance in multiple packaging. So when that was opened, it was not clear to us if 3 incorporated item 4 as well. And if you look, item 2 also says green leafy substance in multiple packaging. So it was not clear upon inventory if item 4 was in there. I'm not aware of the customer was notified of this. I'm not aware of them responding back or with any sort of reply on this matter.
That's correct. We reached out to them during the investigation and did not get a reply. And then also after the investigation, with our results and did not hear back at that point either.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, Maria.
Thanks.
Next is the Erie County Toxicology Laboratory. The laboratory notified DCJS and ANAD of unexpected results on a proficiency test. Pentobarbital and broazepam were not reported. Following an investigation, it was determined that internal standard recovery was low for the proficiency test sample. Laboratory policy recommends reanalysis for samples with low internal standard. However, that was not done in this case. Prior runs were reviewed to determine if any other cases should have been reanalyzed. No cases were found to be effective. The analysts reviewed the laboratory policy and procedures and reanalyzed the PT sample, producing acceptable results. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Are you talking? Okay. Taylor, would you locate Melissa Bowler for us?
Sure, give me just 1 second. I believe she called in. Hello, is this Melissa?
Hi, how are you? I had a
No, I'm
question.
sorry. That was Taylor.
Oh,
She's still
I
muted.
phone number 1716 ending in 000. Is this Melissa Bowler? If you're trying to speak, you're muted right now.
I think you have to use *6 to unmute.
Hold on 1 second. We're trying to reach her through email as well.
Do you want me to try to call?
If you would like to, yes. Do you have the number or would you like it sent to you?
Looks, I have a number. It looks like a generic number, but we'll try. Hi, Melissa. I'm gonna put you on, this is Shelley. I'm gonna put you on speakerphone with the commission, okay? Thank you. Okay, we have her on speakerphone. Hello.
Hi, this is Jessica. I just had a question about, in the course of your investigation, corrective action, you noted that your standard operating procedures have a permissive action that an analyst can take under these circumstances. I just wanted to be clear, if the analyst had taken that action as permitted by the SOPs, would the false negative had been avoided, if that question makes sense?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that question.
Yeah, so part of your investigation into the matter was you looked at your, thank you. Hi, I'm talking to you on the phone here. As part of your investigation into the 2 false negatives on the proficiency test, there seemed to be in your SOPs a permissive action that the analysts could have taken. And if they had taken it, they would have detected the substance at issue in the PT. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, are you re-evaluating your SOPs in light of that? Or are you changing the permissive to a required step that the analyst has to take?
We are in the process of doing some recalibration, so that will be under consideration, but we haven't decided yet how we're going to rework that.
I see. So but you're in the process of validation and you will make that determination.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions for Melissa? Seeing none, thank you, Melissa.
Great, thank you.
All right, our next lab is the Monroe County Crime Laboratory. The laboratory notified DCJS and ANAB that the 30-day notification period for unexpected results was missed on 3 proficiency tests. The lab is determined to ensure reporting within the designated timeframe that a disclosure will be made for all 2025 proficiency tests where unexpected results are anticipated to occur due to laboratory policy and proficiency test planning. Are there any questions for the lab? Okay. The Monroe County Office of the Medical Examiner Forensic Toxicology Lab. There's 2 items here. The first, the laboratory notified DCJS and ANAB of the closeout of a corrective action relating to an unexpected carfentanil proficiency test result first discussed at the December 2024 meeting. The laboratory updated their method and successfully completed their most recent PT. Additionally, the laboratory also notified DCJS and ANAB of an unexpected EDDP proficiency test result. The quantitative result fell outside of the PT provider's acceptable standard deviation. The laboratory investigated the issue and found an expired lot of internal standard had been used. A new lot of internal standard was prepared and the proficiency test samples were reanalyzed, producing acceptable results. The lab will issue amended reports for the affected cases, update the method to prevent the use of old vials when preparing internal standards, and retrain staff on the evaluation of new internal standard preparation. The laboratory considers this matter closed. Are there any questions for the lab on either of these items? Okay, Taylor, could you locate Rebecca Hartman?
Yes, I can. Give me just one moment.
Thank you.
Okay, Rebecca, you've been elevated.
Hello. Can you hear me? Am I muted? No.
Yeah. Hi, Rebecca. I had a question about the amended reports that you issued. Could you just explain what the amended report says with respect to this issue? What's the language on the report? Yeah, thank you.
So basically, we put the updated result. We just changed all of those to qualitative for the EDDP result, any of them that had been reported quantitatively during that time. And we included language describing how there was a potential issue with the quantification of that trace to the certain lot of internal standard. And there was also a memo that was included in the case file about the PT and this investigation.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Rebecca? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next is the Nassau County Office of the Medical Examiner Division of Forensic Toxicology. There are 2 different issues here. The first, the laboratory notified DCJS and ANAB of a closeout of a corrective action relating to an unexpected norfentanyl proficiency test result first discussed at the December 2024 meeting. The results were outside of the laboratory and PT providers' acceptance criteria. The laboratory investigated and determined the matrices of the PT sample affected the extraction and analysis of norfentanyl. The method was modified and tested on December 23rd, 2024. No cases were found to be affected. Second issue, DCGS and ANAB were notified with the closeout of a corrective action relating to an unexpected drug analysis proficiency test. First, 2024 meeting. Following an investigation, the laboratory determined that the contamination was an isolated incident attributed to the analyst's performance of the PT. No previous reported cases were affected. The laboratory has taken several steps to prevent preventive actions, including moving the scene item preparation and testing to another floor dedicated solely to this function, using disposable single-use supplies where applicable, and introducing a standardized form for improved documentation. Questions for the lab on either of those two items? I see two buttons. Getting ready on the time. Okay, Taylor, could you locate,
It's Pi Day.
Dr. Avella or, Mr. Hahn?
Yes, I can. We have Tim Hahn available to speak right now, and Dr. Avello can be available via phone if needed.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, it's Lydia. I just wanted to, it's really more of a comment than a question, but it could also be a question. So in the investigation, you state, and for the commission members, I'm on page 189. The lab determined that the issue was attributed solely to the analyst's performance and doesn't indicate a systemic issue within the lab. But that said, you did make some changes, and you state that it was to, let me make sure. I think it should say, as a system enhancement and preventive action, you did take some steps to improve integrity and quality of scene item testing results. So I am curious as to whether those steps would have been taken but for this incident, because it still seems as though the incident prompted the changes, which would mean that it might not be attributed solely to the analyst's performance. So I just was wondering what your response would be to that.
Well, the lab, as part of the quality management system review, is always looking for ways to improve, the functions and methodology that's in place. And for this scene item testing method, we saw certain improvements that could be made regardless of this, PT failure. The PT failure, like I said, was solely isolated to this analyst because they said this failure or this PT was conducted by other staff in the lab, and they had successfully performed it without issues. So, like I said, it was not something that was systemic to the lab or lab-wide in terms of any equipment or materials that were used. But the lab has been looking to, like I said, we have a separate scope of analysis from toxicology testing, and that we do drug analysis testing, and we have always separated it from postmortem or DWI work. But when an opportunity arose for us to go ahead and have extra lab space in the building, we saw that certainly as a system enhancement or an opportunity for us to completely separate the testing operations from where we do postmortem and DWI testing. So they said we did not see that there was a systemic error, but we certainly saw an opportunity for us to improve the operation and possibly prevent, this sort of occurrence, from happening.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with postmortem scene item testing as a separate testing modality. So correct me if I'm wrong, that's controlled substances that are found at a postmortem scene.
Yes, so we are unique, I think, amongst the tox labs in the state in that we do, we have the accreditation for the C's drug testing where we are testing, drug paraphernalia, drug that might be, located at the death investigation scene. We do not test for any items that may be related to drug possession charges. That goes to our drug chemistry section. So we're just testing scene items that are either located on the decedent or in proximity to the decedent's body, and we use them as an aid in performing, the toxicological investigation.
And is that a separate designation on your scope of accreditation?
That is correct, yes. We have a separate scope of accreditation for that testing.
Okay, thank you.
Could you walk through how you determined that this was just isolated to this one particular analyst and was not a larger systemic issue in the lab, and as a result concluded that casework was not affected?
Sure. Like I mentioned, the PT was performed by 2 other analysts in the lab, using, the same reagents, roughly the same material that this affected analyst has used, and they obtained the correct result. In addition, we retain a PT sample in case of an issue like this were to arise, where we can go back and make sure that we have a sample that has been untouched by anybody, where we can go ahead and test that, which we did. We investigated and evaluated all of the reagents, the pipettes, the instruments that were used by this individual, previous to the testing and subsequent to the testing, and saw no issues. Like I said, we went back and retrospectively reviewed, casework and reanalyzed casework for, I believe, about 14 months. And there were no issues that were, determined. So like I said, it really seems to be an isolated incident. The source of the contamination was undetermined. We feel that, within the routine cleaning steps or, between analyses, that whatever their contamination was removed. They said there was no systemic issue that we saw based upon the other analysts' involvement and, like their evaluation of all the equipment and the materials that was utilized.
Thanks. So when you say like you looked at the pipetters and whatnot, what are you actually doing? Are you testing them to see if they test positive for a substance or something, or how exactly are you doing that? If you could also speak to when you look back at a substantial amount of casework, 14 months worth, what are you actually looking for?
Okay. In terms of the pipetters or the pipettes, we track them with each analysis, so we know which pipette was used for the analysis and which pipette was used for any other analysis. And we verify those pipettes each week, so we can go back and look to see which pipette was used in this particular PT and which other analyses was it used in, and was xylazine detected in any of those additional analyses that might have been conducted not part of this PT, which were none. We did look at that pipette immediately following this incident just to make sure that there was no contamination with xylazine on this particular pipette, and it was not. Of course, like I said, that was several weeks after the testing event. Sorry, what was the second part? Was the in terms of the case look back. We went back and looked at all cases that this analyst had handled. We looked in particular for any case in the lab where xylazine was detected. We went ahead and reanalyzed those cases. In all instances, the case results that were from the reanalysis were consistent with the initial findings. And like I said, in all of the findings, we reanalyzed this affected analysts casework were consistent with the findings, with the original findings.
The answer to this question, you might have actually incorporated it in what you were just saying, but was xylazine in the building like that day anywhere? Like, did you sort of retry?
No, we did look at that facet where was anything prepared with xylazine, like there is xylazine, you know, we have drug standards or reference drug standards that contain xylazine. But we had looked back to see, you know, was xylazine, you know, was that pipette, let's say, used to prepare a working solution for xylazine? It was not. But we did look back and saw that xylazine, a working solution, was prepared, I think about 2 weeks before. But like I said, the equipment that was used post preparation of that working solution was used in other methods where xylazine was not detected, so we don't feel that was a source of the contamination. But like I said, we do have xylazine there, but the preparations are done separately, so that there's very limited chance of contamination from that.
Thanks.
Actually, I have a question, if you're done, Jessica. Hi, Tim, this is Michelle Schmidt. Just a quick question. It says that the analyst did initial screening with the presumptive indication of xylazine. Do you have is there a color test or something that gave initial indication?
Yeah, so the way that the method works is we do an initial screen of the scene item. And in that screen, it's a GCMS screen, a full scan screen, where we look, you know, and we had a presumptive identification of xylazine. Then we do a secondary GCMS confirmation using a known reference standard of xylazine for comparison to the unknown sample.
Okay. And can I just ask, is it the same vial that goes through both those tests, or do you sample it twice?
It is the same vial that goes through both of those tests.
I see. And regarding the pipettes, so you're not using disposable pipettes for unknown samples? We're
using disposable pipettes. The other material that we had purchased in terms of disposable were more secondary apparatuses, like a mortar and pestle, you know, that sort of stuff. But the direct, you know, sampling has always been using disposable materials.
So it's not a one and done pipette though. They're getting reused.
No, the pipette tips are disposable.
Using tips. I see. I see. Okay, I wasn't clear on that. Okay.
And just to go back on that other one, in terms of the vial, we do analyze separate vials of different dilution factors. So in the initial screen, we do have separate preparations of a times 10, a times 100, and times 1,000 that will typically run with that.
But from the same scoop, let's call it, of
it's
powder?
Coming from the same, yeah, it's coming from the same stock. Many times in these instances, we're working with materials where we only have one chance to make a stock, of the item.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the lab? All right, seeing none, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology. There's two different items here. The first, the laboratory notified DCPS and ANAD of an unexpected result on a serology proficiency test. An inconclusive result from semen was reported. The laboratory noted that 2 other participants reported positive semen results for the sample. Further testing is being performed on the item to confirm results. The laboratory has also provided DCPS and ANAD with an update on their case-to-case contamination investigation, first discussed at September 2024 meeting. They've completed a review of over 5,700 cases and found 27 cases affected. Internal review of cases will continue. Are there questions for the laboratory?
Michelle, I have a question on the first one, the
PT?
serology proficiency test.
Sure. We're getting people to the table.
Great.
Do you, yep, want them to identify who's here?
Sure.
Hi, Craig, Deputy Director, Department of Forensic Biology.
Tiffany Bastos, DNA Technical Leader. Kira McLean, Quality Assurance Manager.
And Meredith Rosenberg, I'm remote.
Good morning, everybody. This is Commissioner Fitzpatrick. I don't know who to address the question to, but whoever feels qualified to answer it. So I understand that this was a proficiency test. Could I first ask item 6? What is item 6 in the proficiency test? Is it an article of clothing or a swab, or what is it?
I don't recall honestly what the material was. That was item 6.
Okay. So the vendor says that the analyst should only detect saliva. However, the analyst detected saliva and was inconclusive for semen. And then the vendor volunteered that 2 other labs also had detected semen, apparently in the same batch or the same group sample. Is this a problem with the analysts or a problem with the vendor, or is it too early to say?
That's what we're looking into by doing a reanalysis of this sample. Also to say this was done for our molecular serology team. As the they detected saliva, they had some peptides that represented semen, but not enough peptides to call it detected for semen. So that's why it was reported as inconclusive. As you said, the vendors indicated it should just be saliva. However, 2 other labs indicated they did detect semen. So, I think with our retesting, that will help to have us figure out, was it an analyst issue in our lab, or was it something with the preparation of the sample from the vendor?
And we'll have that, I assume, by the next meeting.
Yes, we should. Yes.
Okay. I mean, it just seems like I understand all mistakes on the proficiency test are important, but this seems like kind of a whopper and kind of a coincidence that 2 other labs came to almost the same conclusion. But thank you. I'll look forward to the conclusion of your investigation into it.
Thank you.
I have one quick question. Mike Marciano. Did the vendor send any kind of official, the PT send any kind of official communication to you about the other 2 labs, or will they?
What we receive is the vendor report, which lists basically all the results of other laboratories. So it doesn't tell you which lab, it just says, 25 labs detected this. 2, this lab detected this. So that's all the information we have at this time. What I intend to do is, based upon our reanalysis of the samples, if we generate a theory of what we think this is, and it comes back to that we think it was a vendor preparation, then we would reach out to the vendor and ask them to do an investigation.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
When you report these results, do you use the testing methodology on the reporting form, or because this was your molecular serology, but could the other laboratories just within the cartridge type test, like a presumptive? Yeah.
Yes, we do indicate that.
All right.
On the vendor.
So if I remember correctly, this is a newer test in your laboratory. So in this particular instance, what are the possible conclusions that can be made for a test result?
So the way the assay is set up is, it's looking for a certain number of peptides for each of the phosphates. So for semen, I believe it's 9 peptide that's looking for. So if it detects all 9 peptides, then the conclusion will be detected. If it detects less than 3 of the peptides, the conclusion is not detected.
Okay.
And then anything in the middle would be the situation, especially with an older sample where the peptides may have started to degrade or break down, where 1 or 2 of them were not detected. But the
Yeah, thank you. Do you know how many peptides were detected here?
don't have that.
Okay.
Any further questions about the PT? Any questions about the other? Stuff? Yes, yes.
We received your February 10th update as part of both the commission materials and also, I received it as a defender, right? You did, send this update to the stakeholders. So of course, that's important for us. You did indicate, in this one that there would be the next phase of your review of the contamination event will be a scaled down evaluation focusing on a narrower subset of cases processed prior to March 2024. So I have some questions about that. Why are you scaling it down? And could you describe what scaling down actually means in terms of your sampling or the time period, or what that actually means and what that review will encompass?
Sure. So the scale down review prior to March, considering the RCA committee's recommendations to do a further retrospective on criminalists involved with contamination events where they had more than 2 instances, more than 2 samples that had been contaminated. That was how we were going to limit the further retrospective to focus on cases examined by those individuals.
And that's based on the fact that during the previous phases, the results that were seen in those phases, the fact that it was just limited to those.
The 9, sorry.
Yes. Right, so all from March 2024 until August 2024, we looked at 100% of all evidence examiners. And within all that time period, the incidents were isolated to 9 criminalists. And then of the 9 criminalists, 4 had more than 2 instances.
So sorry, so again, this limited, you said, you're only gonna be looking at those 9, you said, or the 4?
So the next phase will be focusing not on all of the examiners, but on those 9 individuals in a subset of the testing that's done for that next phase. And based on what we see in those results, we will determine what the process will be. So we will be going back previous to March, in July of 2023, looking at a subset of those.
So the time period is to go back to July 2023?
For now. Yeah.
For now. And then when you say subset of their cases, what do you mean by that?
Well, for the individuals that had more than 2 occurrences, we're looking at all of their case permit.
And what about for the other 7? Or sorry, I'm doing my math wrong. What about for the other of the 9 that didn't have it?
We're looking at a portion of their previous work for now. We are focusing on the 4 individuals first, and then we'll decide how much of the other 5 we'll look at going forward. You know, it's a tremendous amount of resources that have been employed, instead we're trying to also get hits done during the same time. The 20,000 samples we already looked at, and that's the 7 cases. So we're trying to partition it out and ensure that in cases that are going out the door, get the attention as ones that have already gone up.
So you haven't determined yet which subset for those that don't have, those 9 analysts that don't have 2 or more incidents, did I understand that right?
Right.
Okay. Okay, when will you determine? Well, what, I guess what I'm asking, yeah, sorry.
There's a bit of flux going on in laboratory.
Yeah, a bit, right. How are you gonna make that determination? I guess is the question.
We're still assessing that internally.
Yeah,
Looking at all options.
Yeah. And you do mention the 20,000 samples that you've looked at, and I know you've received at this point 2 letters from statisticians. One, Dr. Alicia Karakuri, as well as Dr. Daniel Rabinowitz. Dr. Karakuri, head of the Center for Statistics and Applications in Forensic Evidence. And then Dr. Daniel Rabinowitz, who is a professor of statistics at Columbia. I know you got them yesterday, so, you know, and they're dense, right? So I understand you haven't probably had a chance to thoroughly digest them. But they do talk, I think both letters do raise particularly the question of what does this 20,000 actually mean? You know, I do understand you haven't had a chance to digest the letters, but I would like to ask you, what does that 20,000, you said we've looked at 20,000 cases, what do you actually mean? Does that mean every one of those 20,000 has been compared to something else? Does that mean that's every case that came in and some were not suitable to be compared? So could you just describe what that means?
Sure, just to clarify, it was 20,000 samples that so far have been evaluated, and whether it's been a direct comparison of the data generated for a sample to all other samples generated based on the examining analyst's work for that particular day. If there, yes, some cases were inconclusive, meaning or insufficient, so they didn't have data to be compared. So yeah, there are some that fall into that category. And just to emphasize the work that we've done, you know, we're looking to identify all instances of contamination. So we're reporting what we've looked at so far, and we're, you know, the number will continue to grow because we're still looking back to try and find every single incident that has occurred.
I think if that's the goal though, and I think it's expressed in the letters, if that's the goal, then I think certainly stakeholders need to be very clear on what samples are being excluded from the evaluation process, right? We've heard in the past, you did explain that you were only treating a certain kind of case as a possible contaminator, right? And you were only using star mix on those cases, and please correct me if I get this wrong, but on those cases where you were able to successfully deconvolute or separate out a major contributor of at least, I think it's 10 loci, please correct me if I'm wrong. So that is a very particular subset of those 20,000 samples. And I think that's certainly that was the thrust of some of the points in the letters that were submitted. But that is of great interest to stakeholders. Is what cases are being excluded from your examination and why? And if your goal is to catch every instance of contamination, a lot of alcohol, you know, for sure, how do you know you're not missing stuff?
So just to clarify a couple points on what you said. So what you said about the deconvoluted profiles being like 10 or 11 loci. So those profiles were the ones that could be considered as contaminators, right? But those profiles are compared to any and all mixtures that are deemed suitable for comparison within other cases from the examiner for that day or that week, depending on how those cases were treated for that particular week. So for, you know, all of March through August, any sample that was deemed suitable for comparison to a reference to a suspect, to a victim, et cetera, would have had some type of comparison done to check for contamination, right? Whether it was through a manual check or through star mix, using that method. And all of those protocols have been made available, right? And how we're doing those checks. All of the cases that have had checks done have quality control paperwork, we're recertifying like every single case that we've looked at from May to August to get that quality control paperwork into the files to show exactly what's been done for each of those cases. So, and that's as comprehensive as we can be, I think, from March to August so far, and like you said, we're going further back, starting with early 2024 and late 2023.
Right, we haven't had a chance to really look at those letters yet, but we certainly, you know, appreciate the value of looking at it from the students. So the same book we have to discuss what further steps may or may not be done, given what we've seen.
And you've been diligent in terms of, you know, having these periodic updates on the progress of your investigation. Will you include your decision on that or your analysis of the information in the letters in your next update?
Possibly, depending on what decisions have been made by them.
Albany, any questions?
Yeah, Shelley, this is Commissioner Fitzpatrick again to the assembled group from ACME. Has anybody had an opportunity to read the 2 letters from the statisticians provided by the defense bar in New York?
Yeah, I think that was our fault.
You have.
I mean, I have read the letters, but we haven't had a chance to discuss them together. One of them came.
Yeah, I just have a couple.
Yeah,
I have a couple of questions about the letters. If you haven't had sufficient time to digest them, and you can't answer, that's fine. My understanding is they both would like you to retest every single piece of evidence over the last 25 years in New York. Is that about right?
No, that's not right. No.
Okay.
Not what they're saying.
Let me go to Professor.
The good news is that both statisticians said they're available for questions. So the commission can reach out to them if there's a question about exactly, you know, what they are saying.
I was directing my questions to this group, not you, Jessica. Sorry. I don't know how to pronounce or to refer to him. I believe it's Professor Rabinowitz. Page 2 of his letter. Although the ACME protocol for detecting contamination in samples without full determination of profiles is not described in detail, it appears that the ACME has decided not to attempt, in part out of concern that the StarMix software for mixture-to-mixture comparisons has not been sufficiently validated. Now, ACME uses StarMix, correct?
Yes, we do.
Is that statement by the professor correct? That you're concerned that StarMix software for mixture-to-mixture comparisons has not been sufficiently validated?
Well, we have not validated StarMix for mixture to mixture comparison. That was something that we discussed at the last meeting.
Yeah, it's not that we have a concern that StarMix doesn't have that capability. We know that it's a portion of the software. We have not performed an internal validation on that function of the software.
So, but is the statement correct that you decided not to attempt a full validation because of your concern about that?
It wasn't a concern about the software, but we have not attempted an internal validation on that component of the software.
All right, then going on to Professor Carrick-Query, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. When she gets to the heart of the matter and suggesting to you a statistically justified audit sampling approach, she refers to your plan calling for the selection of 2 lab criminalists each week and review of all cases examined by those 2 individuals during a 3-day period. Is that correct? Is that the analysis setup that you've used?
I haven't read her letter in the entirety, so, but I believe that sounds like she's referring to our monitoring process that we're using after we have made all of our updates in protocols and retraining and all of the RCA recommendation implementation. And so we were monitoring two examiners per week for 3 days of everything that they examined.
All right, but then she gets to the heart of the matter and she says, I'm gonna read this and then I want to go through it with you. It is unclear how managers, that would be you, decided that one, the unit of analysis should be a criminalist. Two is the appropriate sample size. And three, focusing on cases analyzed during a 3-day period is appropriate. Well, first of all, you picked criminalist as the unit of analysis because that's who does the DNA work. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know who else you would pick, the receptionist or the janitor. So going on to number 2, she says 2 is the appropriate sample size, but that's not accurate, is it? The sample size could be several dozen. You just selected 2 criminalists, am I right?
Correct. It's 2 criminalists and all the cases that they examined, or all the cuttings they made of evidence over a 3-day period. So you're correct. It could be several dozen.
Yeah, so the sample size is not 2. And then her third point, it is unclear how managers decided that focusing on cases analyzing during a 3-day period is appropriate. Is it possible that that's appropriate because you have work to do in detecting and solving criminal cases? Is that possible?
Yes, it also was based on what we had seen on the case-to-case contamination events in the past, and that they all occurred typically within a single-day period, and occasionally over a 1 to 3 day period. So we were consistent with what we had observed in the previous contamination event.
And in some instances, that they're cutting is for the entire week. And the way the laboratory is set up is that the analysts themselves are on a rotation as we go. So they would be in the lab for doing evidence exam for that week and then move on to another duty the following week.
All right, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll revisit this after you've had further time to review the suggestions by the statisticians.
I just wanted to add for the record, the first letter by Alicia Carriqueri was provided to the commission by email the evening of March 11th. And the letter from Daniel Rabinowitz was provided by email the morning of March 12th of this year. So 2 and 3 days ago, these were provided to the commission, not a formal request by the commission.
Can I ask how the lab received the letters from the 2 individuals?
We received them via email. Meredith and myself as deputy directors, along with Dr. Sloan as the acting director, received one yesterday afternoon. And then the other one in the technical meeting was Wednesday morning or Thursday.
Directly from the authors?
From both professors.
From both professors?
Yes.
Okay, so my question was, did they reach out to you directly? You don't have an idea, well, did you speak to them or you didn't speak to them? Okay.
No, I have to.
Okay, so you don't have any way of knowing how long they've been reviewing the information?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. I agree that, she's looking more forward, your plan going forward. This has nothing to do with the plan, retrospective, going back and looking backwards. The 3 focusing on cases for criminalists, et cetera, that we were just assessing. Okay. Thank you.
Could I just clarify with respect to your sampling going forward? when you say, you take it was a 3-day, sample of the analyst who's randomly chosen's casework, that doesn't actually mean that all the cases they worked on will necessarily, be compared, right? You still choose a subset of those cases. So for instance, if they don't meet the required, I mean, you'll look at all of them, but they won't necessarily be compared to see if they are contaminating other samples. For instance, if they don't meet the requirements for how many loci were deduced, for instance.
Yeah, it's the same method. So the number of loci deduced would be for the potential contaminator profiles. They're treated that way, and then they would be compared to any mixtures for all the cuttings from those 3 days. So,
Right, so there's a narrower subset of what is treating as a contaminator or contaminated, right? So I think that's the thrust of these letters as well, or part of it, to be very clear about, the subset of cases that are not being compared as possible contaminating samples and why that might be.
Any other questions in Albany? And just for the record, Dr. Bucklino, we lost him during the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Next is the New York City Police Department latent print section. DCJS and ANAD were notified of a closeout of a corrective action that resulted from a false exclusion. First discussed at the September 2024 meeting. To remediate the possible causes found during the investigation, the lab is instituting improvements to their procedures that include requiring enhanced documentation, reasons for exclusion to be clearly documented, and requiring the use of comparison software. Previous casework of the examiners involved is also being evaluated. Are there any civil laboratory?
And my lady, like,
Yes. Yes.
Page 200. Hi.
While you're looking, introduce. If the Will Duff is looking, you can introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Jennifer Lady at the NYPD latent print section. I'm the quality assurance manager.
Up to, yeah, okay. Sorry, so the disclosure, in the commission's materials is with respect stated February 12, 2025, and it's respect to, false exclusions, due to a reanalysis that was requested, of your section. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And it's because the original examiner had retired, so the case was reassigned to a new examiner. And that new examiner made 4 identifications to the suspect that were verified. But the original examiner and verifier had actually excluded the suspect. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And as part of your, I guess, corrective action or investigation, you are exploring the use of a comparison software. Is that right?
Yeah.
What is the name of that software?
IDEMIA is the company. It's a multi-biometric identification system. It's a software that we use for all of our comparisons. I've had that.
Okay.
I think it's used pretty much by everybody in the state.
Okay. So it's not a new software?
No.
It's, okay, I see. It's just you're changing your SOPs to work, well, could you explain what you're considering doing that's different or new with this comparison software?
Yes. So we have been for a very long time used that software for database searches. And in this particular case and in other cases like this, where we get elimination or suspect prints that are provided from the investigator. They're inked prints. They are not in the traditional format of an arrest card print. And so there hasn't really been any good way of introducing those prints into the system to use the algorithms of the system and
has within them to do a comparison. It wasn't until very recently that we discovered that with an upgrade to our state system, one technology that was not available before, which would be to upload those and use that functionality suddenly appeared, like we didn't know about it, like we weren't informed, we just happened to stumble upon it. Most of our workstations are not state workstations, they're city workstations. Our city workstations don't have that capability. So we are limited in that extent. But there are other ways that we can use the technology to scan in those major case prints, as we call them, to use them in a different functionality of computers that compare functionality that lets you, instead of looking at them through a magnifying glass at your desk, essentially put it up on a computer screen, use some of the enhancement features to, you know, flip the white to the black or whatever you need to do to make it a little bit more easily visible. So we are introducing that as a requirement that everybody needs to be doing that before they can finish their examination.
You also indicated that another action you're taking as part of your, I guess, corrective action process is to evaluate the previous casework of the examiners involved.
Yes.
I'm on the second page here.
Yeah,
201 for the commission. And that the new exam, all previous comparisons in the case will be re-examined and re-verified. And then the topic du jour, statistical sampling. You indicated that you're going to take a statistical sampling of both the original examiner and the original verifiers exclusions. Is it just exclusions or also identifications and inconclusives, or?
It's just the exclusions.
Okay. And how are you doing that sampling?
I compiled a list of, I took a 3-year time frame. And I compiled a list of every case that they had completed in that time frame for the examiner as the primary examiner, and then for the verifier as verifier. And did a statistical sampling of, I wrote down every single case that had an exclusion in it. Numbered them from 1 to whatever. Used a random number generator to pick the cases, and then we did the statistical sampling, so it was, we were 95% confidence level, that 90% of our target would be correct.
And you'll update us at the next meeting about what that sampling is and what you're.
Yeah, we're still in progress, but we're working our way through it.
Okay. There had been in the past, and I don't believe there is an update on this, but there is another investigation I think your lab is conducting about a reanalysis of a cold case from 1994. Just want to check, is that still ongoing?
Yes, that's still ongoing.
Okay. And do you expect to report on that and?
I'm hoping to close out both of those by the next commission meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. I make no promises.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping.
Okay, thank you.
Albany? Okay. Then, thank you. The New York State Police Crime Laboratory is up next, and there are 2 items here. The laboratory notified DCJS and ANAB of the incorrect reporting of serology results. Results obtained for blood screening of 2 items by a DNA analyst were conflicting with the results reported by a separate serologist in November 2024. The DNA analyst received permission from their supervisor to rescreen the swabs. Then, when they observed staining on the swab during evidence preparation for DNA extraction, the laboratory is investigating this issue. Second item, DCJS and ANAB were notified of unexpected results for an internal prepared body fluid identification proficiency test. Positive urine result was obtained and verified though a negative result was expected. Following a brief pause of the method due to manufacturing issues of test cartridges, a retest yielded the same positive result. Due to concerns with the test items and how they were prepared, the test was invalidated. A procedure to document selection and preparation of test items was created and a new internal test was issued. The new test was successfully completed. Are there any questions for the lab regarding either of these items?
Yes.
Yes, I believe we have State Police in Albany. Yeah, Jill, could you scoot closer to the table so that Mike in the center will pick you up and we can see
I
you?
didn't want to block Fitz. I didn't want to take Fitzpatrick off the screen there, so, yeah. Is that okay? Are we all right?
Yes.
Julie as well, or no? Oh, no.
Oh,
Should we
it's
go to the
Julie.
other side? Let's go to the other side.
Yeah.
Sorry, here, over here, Julie. We're gonna sit next to Lindsay. I think the angle's better over here, right? Can you see us now? Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, hi. What was the problem with the cartridges?
We had detected an issue in the quality performance of the cartridges, and then a new lot wasn't available for an extended period of time. So we couldn't conduct any reanalysis on that proficiency test until we received a new lot of cartridges, which we then quality control tested to confirm that they were performing according to standards, and then we proceeded with reanalysis of the proficiency test samples.
What was the quality problem when you tested the cartridges originally? Was it giving you false negatives or false positives, or what was the quality problem?
I don't recall the specific details. I believe there was an extra line that was showing up. We saw a doublet when there should have only been a single line.
Okay. Were those cartridges used in casework? Or were these cartridges used in casework?
We were using some of the cartridges from that lot, and as soon as we observed that doublet, and that doublet was again observed in another one, we immediately pulled that lot from casework. It was apparent that there was some issue with the cartridge because of that doublet line appearing. So once we observed the issue with that lot of cartridges, we immediately stopped using them. But then there was a delay in getting a new lot for us to quality control test and resume casework.
Okay, so when you say like a double line, it's not like one line was in the control and the other was in the positive. You mean like two lines right next to each
From
other,
what I
so it's
recall,
always
there was a doublet of like two lines where there should have only been one line.
right. I guess my question is it facially apparent when you look at the thing that's wrong, or could it be
Yes,
like?
it was, from what I recall, it was immediately apparent that was something wrong. The cartridge wasn't performing properly. There shouldn't have been a doublet there.
And this was for those cases in which there was this malfunctioning cartridge. Was there reanalysis done later, or there's a note in the file or on the report that this was occurring?
If there was open cases, we suspended any work on those cases until we received a new lot of cartridges that then passed our quality control.
Okay. My other question is, what exactly was the problem with the preparation of, was it blue jeans or something, for the PT test? What was the problem? Why didn't it work?
Well, I don't think we could rule out that wasn't an issue, because of the way the proficiency test was in-house was made. So in an abundance of caution, and because, first of all, we had the delay on the cartridges also, the test was, first of all, there was reanalysis, but then also a new item was prepared, a fresh new item that had not been used in any other training or proficiency test preparation.
Oh, was that potentially the problem is the same item of evidence or the same larger item had been used before, so maybe there was some issue. I was trying to figure out why that could have been a problem.
I mean, it could have been,
Sorry?
yes.
Yeah, okay. And I'm also just thinking, is it possible that there was a problem with the analyst's performance? Is that something you're investigating? Right, because if that's the finding, then that would have to be disclosed to as grading.
This is a proficiency test, so, once we looked further into how the samples were prepared and had concerns, once we received a new lot of cartridges, we discussed this with, our laboratory quality administration and Dr. Dooley, and it was agreed upon mutually that because there is a concern on how those internal proficiency tests were prepared, that we would get a fresh item that had not been previously used in training and prepare new PTs, which the analyst successfully completed.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one quick question about the serology, the blood test. How do you think that happened? Was it, did someone just miss the stains and not test them, or what happened there?
We believe that the analyst did conduct the test, but in our LIMS system, there's a drop-down menu where the analyst can select either positive or negative, which that selection then triggers the result that appears on the laboratory report. That there was some extenuating circumstance that led the analyst to, in attention to detail, where they selected for two of the items they tested, they selected the wrong result. They selected negative when they should have selected positive.
We've all done that and dropped out before, I think, too. So, yeah.
Yes, so we have since modified our protocol to actually add an additional field to our LIMS system, and now we require the analyst to hand type a restatement of their result, as well as information on how they tested the item.
Got it. Great. Good.
Okay. Anybody further questions? All right, thank you. You're good. All right, up next, the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory. This is a closeout of a corrective action relating to an incorrect amount of template DNA used for amplification, leading to an uninterpretable DNA profile. First discussed at the September 2024 meeting. Following investigation, the laboratory worksheet was modified to implement an additional check documented by a second qualified individual to verify how much target DNA will be amplified for each sample. The worksheet will also show when edits are made to entries and by whom. Analysts have been made aware of quiet spaces in the laboratory to allow for work to be completed without interruption. Management is also working to add positions for the section to assist with additional responsibilities besides casework to alleviate stress. AAD has acknowledged receipt of this closeout. Are there any questions for the laboratory?
Yes.
Okay. Taylor, can you find our Suffolk County reps?
Give me just one moment here. Inga, you've been elevated. If you have a camera, feel free to turn it on.
Hello.
Hello, this is Lydia. Question about the samples addition to the worksheets. So was this a sample from a sexual assault kit that was added to a handled extraction worksheet?
Yes?
Yeah, so the recut essentially, so after the first sample, it was a sexual assault kit sample, it was a vaginal swab. That was incorrectly added to a microcon all sheet, so like 12 nanograms were amplified, it was overblown. What we do in those instances is we'll go back to see if we could do a recut on the same sample, so we can develop a profile. So in that attempt, when that recut was done, that sample was inadvertently placed onto a handled extraction, not a differential. So when we got the results for that, there was, in addition to the fact that there was an insufficient, inconclusive amount of male DNA present in that sample, the ratio of male to female DNA or female to male DNA was too large that it couldn't be amplified autosomal in our autosomal system. So that
I'm sorry. How are the samples added to the worksheets? Is it electronically by the LIMS or is it manually added?
No, it's a manual transcription. So the results are presented, we use Quantrio, so it's presented from the paper copy. There's a list of the samples. Every target is listed on that paperwork for each sample. So there's 4 targets per sample. The analyst looks at the paper. They will then do a manual calculation on a calculator to figure out how much volume to be added to a microcon or an amplification sheet. In this instance, the analyst looked at the Y target, which was 0.0074 nanograms per microliter. However, the small autosomal, which is the total human target, was 0.256 nanograms. When they looked at it, they calculated their manual calculation based on the Y value. They added it to the sheet. It was microcon all. So, as opposed to thinking they were amping 370 picograms approximately, they amped 12 nanograms. But it's because it's a manual transcription. We don't have, our LIMS system does not take us through the DNA module. It stops at evidence exam. We are still using paper copies of our quant results, manually performing a calculation with a calculator, deciding how much volume to use, and placing that onto a Word or an Excel sheet at this time. So in order to stop this from happening in the future, that manual transcription is still happening, but now what we're doing is we're having, before that microcon sheet is being done by the analysts on the bench, they're checking all those values because now we're putting the quant values directly from the quant data sheet. The analyst does that when they add it to this microcon sheet, and that value is checked by a second person. They check the whole sheet before they do it to make sure that we're not amplifying 12 nanograms when, our intent is to target 500 picograms.
When you are adding, thank you for that explanation. When you're adding samples to a differential extraction worksheet, what are your sample names? Do your sample names include SF or sperm fraction?
So when you're adding it to a differential extraction,
right.
There's no, because you're adding it to the extraction, we don't have the designations yet for SF or EC or F1 and F2 like we use at our laboratory. When you're adding it to the amplification sheet, those samples will have that designation at that point. So again, this sample went from 3.1.1 to an F1 and F2 fraction, and then was added to, at that point, it's added to the microcon or amplification sheet, depending how much samples being targeted.
So I was just trying to pinpoint the sample naming, the way it could have not ended up on a differential extraction worksheet. So since the sample doesn't get that designation until after the extraction, that's how it could have ended up on that handled extraction worksheet, because there's no way, there's no extra designation to differentiate between handled extraction and differential extraction in the sample name.
At the point it's added to the extraction sheet right at examination,
right,
which is also a manual addition. So again, similar. So when the analyst is on the bench, they're cutting samples. they determine whether they're gonna put onto a handled or a differential, they're adding it physically to a Microsoft Word worksheet.
Okay.
But then when you're choosing to amp, so when that individual got the results from the recut back, there was no F1 and F2 on that because they put it onto a handled worksheet.
That's what I was trying to get at. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, I think we're good here in New York. Albany, you're good? All right, thank you. Thank you. Okay, up next, Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Toxicology. 2 items here. DCJS and A&B have been notified of the final closeout of a missed pipette calibration first discussed at the September 2024 meeting. Calibration services were performed in early December. The laboratory is also notified DCJS and A&B of an unexpected result on a proficiency test. Promethazine was not found due to an error in data processing. Analysts were retrained on what to look for during data processing, and the sample was retested with a positive result. Are there any questions for the lab? Seeing none. Okay, up next, Westchester County Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory, unexpected digital evidence PT results. DCJS was notified of the final closeout of the PT, first discussed in December of 2024. The documents were provided for the December meeting for review, were resubmitted, this time with the signatures to issue that has been reviewed and the resolution has been accepted. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Hold on, sorry. Maybe one.
No, I think I actually have one for the county top lab. It's in the wrong book.
Okay.
I mean, the different book.
So we'll go back to the top.
Yes.
Can we find Chris Gordon, Taylor?
Chris, you can unmute yourself.
Let's see. Can you hear me? How do you unmute?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Chris.
Okay,
Hey, Chris, it's Lydia.
hi.
Hi. You described that, the LCMS QTOF is a new technology and has been in service since September 2024. What's the difference in the way this instrument is responsive versus what you had previously? And what did you have online before the QTOF?
So before we had the QTOF, we had just straight TOF, time of flight mass spec. The difference between the two is that with the QTOF, we have a quadrupole to perform fragmentation. It's extremely sensitive, like it's a whole order of magnitude more sensitive than the old TOF.
So what was it that was, I guess, you said you retrained your analysts on what to look for. Was it I don't want to put words in your mouth. Can you describe what they needed to be retrained on?
So what happened was the way the software integrated a particular peak, the promethazine peak was there, but the retention time was off. So it didn't give a good match. But if you notice that there was a large peak next to the match, had they searched that peak, they would have seen it was promethazine. So we let them know, just because it's integrating one peak, if there's another peak next to it, double check to make sure that it's not picking the wrong match.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I have.
That's all. Albany? All right, thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody on the other item, the public safety laboratory item? Okay. All right. Then with that, thank you all for participating today. The next meeting of the commission will be June 13th, 2025. We'll give you location details when they become available. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All right, and I have a second. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.